What would you change if you could run Curse of Strahd again? I think it's a question that every DM probably asks themselves after running this epic campaign. And we all have those moments where we're like, I wish I would have done that differently. Well, after running this campaign, which lasted for over 3 years, I have a list of things I would absolutely change. From the infamous Death House to the final battle with Strahd, I'll share my biggest regrets and my best ideas for making this dark and dangerous world even better. Whether you're a new DM about to run your first campaign or a seasoned veteran who's just looking for more inspiration, you're going to want to hear these tips. So stick around and let's talk about what I would change after running Curse of Strahd. The first thing that I would do differently is I would prep a lot more. So I read through the book, the full book, probably twice, and then spot read things as I needed to throughout the campaign. But I would have probably read through it another 2 or 3 times, and with a lot more active learning as I read through it, so that I could really digest it and know it well, be able to recall things just off the top of my head without even having to think about it very much. So just the very first thing from the very beginning I would change is just a lot more prep time, because I think it would have been a lot more satisfying to me as a DM to know the world inside and out. And I just I knew it fairly well, not really, really well. And I would really want to know it super well so that it would just be a more immersive and exciting campaign. The other thing I would do is treat the world as if things were still happening, regardless of where the party was. So the way that I ran it was wherever the party was, everything else in the world sort of paused until they got to the next thing. And then, then now you can do this thing and this thing and this thing if you want. And I just kind of held plot lines and story beats and all of those things until the players got to the next thing. And I think a more well-balanced and rich campaign is one where the world continues to turn, the things continue to happen regardless of where the party is, so that their decisions have real consequences. And if they want to spend a week or 2 weeks, shopping in a town or, making armor or whatever it is that they want to do, that might have consequences for things down the road, meaning they might miss story beats or plot lines because they decided to, spend 2 weeks partying or shopping or whatever it is. And letting them know that through the story would have, maybe early on so that they don't miss anything, more consequential. And obviously if there's a story beat or a plot line that they absolutely need to hit, hold that off, and don't let them miss that one. But yeah, that's definitely something I would change, is having the world continue to spin, so to speak, so that things really matter and their timing matters. And we heard about this thing and now we can either stay here and do this, but we might miss that plot line, or we can do this, but we don't get to stay here and build this armor that we want to build. So there's actually decisions that made, just increasing the complexity of the decision space, I think is a big thing that might have enriched the campaign. Another thing I would have changed is actually before even session 0, pre-session 0, I would have talked to my players about the world that they're in and what it looks like, what it feels like, and just so that they could then build their characters in a way if they wanted to, so that it would more seamlessly fit into the world. Because the way that I did it is I just let them build whatever character they want, and then ended up trying to cram in their characters' backstories and things into this world of Strahd, where you're trapped in this plane of the Shadowfell, and they don't always work. And I tried to make that happen for all of my players, and somewhere I think I was more successful than others. The biggest regret I have of that is my rogue character, who was a thief rogue and wanted to be a part of a thieves guild. Well, I had to build out a whole thieves guild into Curse of Strahd that's not there, and I didn't do it very well. I tried to shoehorn it in, but I think he even felt like, I know you're trying to make this work, but it's not working great. And so that was definitely a big regret that I had. Now others, worked a lot more seamlessly. And so, it's just, maybe that was a failure on my part as a DM, not being creative enough to do that. But I think if I had started from a place of, hey, here's what the world looks like, here's what it feels like, here's how it acts and interacts and things like that, then, just high level, 30,000 foot view stuff, but it might have given them a better idea of how they could maybe incorporate their character into the world, and they would help in that process. Another thing I would have changed is I would add a lot more third-party content, and I would do it from the very beginning. So I discovered third-party content for this campaign probably around halfway through, maybe a tiny bit even beyond halfway through. And I started incorporating that in because I fell in love with it. It enriched the world so much and just added this depth to Curse of Strahd that I don't think the book has. I love this campaign module. Don't get me wrong; it's really good. But some of the third-party content that creators out there have made, it's just fantastic and so good. And not only does it add depth to the world and enrich the story, it gives a lot more content. There's just a lot more for the players to encounter and do. And so I would have incorporated third-party content into this campaign from the very beginning and done it as a holistic part of the campaign. And so I think that would have made a really big difference for the players' enjoyment and for my enjoyment as well as a DM. Okay, so this next one is definitely something for the new DMs out there. And it's that I was very, very rigid as a new DM. So it was my very first campaign to DM. I've never done it before. And I was like, I want to play D&D. I'm the only one that I know who's going to DM. So I'm just going to dive in and do it. Well, as a limitation of a new DM who was not maybe as fluent in the rules of 5e as I maybe should have been, I ended up having to try and white knuckle my way through it. And because of that, I was really strict as a DM. And I think it is because I couldn't handle okay, what if they throw this situation at me and I don't know how to deal with it, and I don't want to look stupid as a DM, but it's that was foolish and not the way to go about it. So I ended up about, I don't know, maybe 40 to 60%, somewhere in that range. There was a big turning point about halfway through our campaign, a year, maybe a little bit more into it. I was able to really feel like, okay, I can do this. I'm capable enough to do this. I know it well enough. So let me just relax. And I started, giving rope out to the players, if that makes sense. Instead of holding it really tight, I let let them have rope and let them be creative and stuff. And so it was definitely a progression. And the key pivotal moment for me was one of my players in a side conversation outside of the game told me that he felt like it was me against them, like in conflict. And that really kind of took me aback, and I so appreciate his willingness to have that conversation with me, because it changed the way I DM forever. And this person is extremely special to me, very, very close to me. He's my nephew, and I don't know if he even knows this, but he changed me as a DM on that day with that conversation. And it was at that point where I had to start looking at myself in the mirror and say, okay, maybe I'm doing this wrong. And I was. And so by the end of the campaign, I was a lot more confident as a DM and a lot more free and loose with how, what they could do and what they couldn't do. And, a lot more towards the sort of rule of cool DMing. I'm not that. I'll never be that probably, but a lot more in that direction where they have freedom and creativity to be like, hey, I know the rule says this, but I want to do this. Okay, well, yeah, we can make that work. Let's do this and things like that. Versus early on in the campaign where I'd be like, nope, you can't do that. And so that's absolutely something I would do differently if I were to run Curse of Strahd again. Okay, so another thing that I would change is I would build out the lore a little bit more. I think the book does a pretty good job of that, but I would even do it more. I would drip out lore, especially because I would add third-party content. So I would drip out the lore a lot more consistently throughout the campaign. Because what I ended up happening is there would be no lore, and then all of a sudden a big lore dump. And then again, dry streak of no lore, and then a lore dump. And so I think it would just be more satisfying maybe as a player if they could get drips of lore all the way through the campaign. It would maybe help them invest in the world more and seek out some of those storylines and plot lines that I maybe have prepared for and things like that. So that's a big one that I think I would absolutely do differently. Another thing I would do for this campaign specifically is build out the horror more. So I tried to do this, but being a new DM, I didn't do it very well. But that feeling of the hair standing on the back of your neck, or you feel eyes on the back of your head, or you like there's something around every corner, or all of that kind of like suspension and part of the horror, I would ramp up. There were parts of the campaign where I kind of let that fall off the plate accidentally. And so there would be stretches of the campaign where they didn't feel that horror and that the oppression of the world that this book is set in. And so I would absolutely ramp that up and keep it consistent throughout. And I will say that it does help to have players that buy into that. Because I did have one player who didn't really buy into that, and he was just like, yeah, this is fake and it's not real and whatever, okay, there's some creepy thing over there, whatever, I don't care. And so he didn't really buy into it. And so that made it difficult for me as a DM, but I still think that it was incumbent upon me as a DM to really make them feel how oppressive and dark and dangerous this world is. And that's absolutely something I would change. I would have more encounters with Strahd. So not necessarily fights, but encounters where he shows up as a bat, or they see him looking, they maybe sense him in the woods somewhere, or, just things like that. Like I did have one time where I had him sneak into their camp because he's got a massively high stealth check. And so I had him sneak into their camp and steal something from them that they were really mad about it. Actually, they really liked that item. And so that was one thing that I actually thought was that I did well, but I would have a lot more things like that. Not necessarily that, but and then maybe a couple more actual fights with them, maybe early on, so that they can get a sense of, oh my gosh, he's so powerful. Because later on in the campaign, they're really powerful too, and they don't really feel that as much. So those are some of the things that I would do just to sort of ramp up the horror and the feeling of dread in the world. Another thing I would do is I would add a lot more puzzles and games and things like that, mazes maybe. Just content that they can go through that's not just like, hey, you go down the road to the next town and here's a town that you can do stuff in, but just like dungeon things and puzzles and things like that, things that maybe help them think through things and stuff like that. And like, oh, we have to actually use our brains on this part. Those are things I would add to the campaign. And I tried to do that, towards the end after I was, really deep into the third party content, but it felt like, it was a little late at that point and I'm just trying to shoehorn this in. And so I would have done that from the very beginning and built it into the story of, that we were telling. And so these are the things that I would change if I ran Curse of Strahd again, and I hope that it was helpful to you. So if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe, and tell me down below, if you've run Curse of Strahd, what would you have changed and done differently down in the comments. And thank you for watching, and we will see you next time. Bye.